practice, I would say, as a background. And also quick facts about the DPR, the current seats in the parliament. This is actually the outgoing parliament because these members were all elected in the last election back in 2019. There are 575 MPs in the DPR. The party that got the most seats was the PDIP, the Indonesian Democratic Party of Struggle. This is the party that, this is actually the Jokowi's party that already explained by Dara. They also take the speakership. So the speaker of the parliament is now from the PDIP. The only remaining opposition currently is the PKS party, holding only about 8% of the seats, only 50 seats. Previously, Democrat Party is also it was also the opposition, but recently they joined the ruling coalition. So this is basically the background of the structure of our legislative body. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay.
Bit of a delay.
Yeah. Okay. So what happens then after the election, right? First, we have to look at the political parties involved. There are 18 parties competing in this election, but there's actually parliamentary threshold of 4%. So as of today, only 9 parties are eligible for parliamentary seats at the national level, which means it will remain the same as the previous one or the outgoing parliament, right? So the first group on the left side here consists of parties backing the first presidential candidate. The middle group supports the second presidential candidate, while these two parties, PDIP and PPP, are backing the third candidate. The other parties listed below are part of the coalition, but they don't meet the parliamentary threshold of 4%. And the remaining two here below are parties without a coalition. So on the political spectrum of political parties that you also asked, Kacha, I hope maybe later Dara, Nadia, or even Kacha may also add to this. I will give 2 different arguments actually on this. The first one, many, I would say, observers of Indonesian politics think that parties actually differ very little on matters of policy and ideology. But one stark division could be the nationalist-leaning parties, and the other end of the spectrum is the religious-based or Islamist. The difference, I would say, is in the degree to which they believe Islam should play a role in public affairs. So the other stance is Pancasila, or the nationalist-leaning parties, which is the official state ideology, which implies that the adoption of pluralist position as opposed to these Islamist-leaning parties. But it's actually not quite associated with programmatic differences in main areas, such as fiscal or social policies. And the second argument that says Indonesian politics is actually dominated by a cartel of parties, which are more focused on sharing power than on ideological differences. So as a result, parties are willing to form very broad and I would say heterogeneous in terms of ideology, or we call it rainbow coalitions, comprising both Islamist and nationalist parties. So for example, here we can see actually the one in the spectrum of nationalists, for example, the PDIP, Gerindra, and then Golkar and Democrat, they tend to be in the center, and then in the other side of the spectrum is the Islamist or religious leaning parties are the PKS, PPP, and PKB. You can see they are all in, PKS and PKB. Even in the Islamist spectrum, they have quite a different stance as well. Like PKS is more conservative, while PKB is more moderate Muslim, and they are in the same coalition with Nasdem, which is more nationalist. So this is nationalist-leaning parties. So this is, I think this speaks to the second argument that I just said. Okay, so the next slide, please. Okay, so this is the predicted seats in the parliament based on the recent votes counted as of today, which is around 65% of the total votes. Voting is actually still ongoing. Sorry, I mean vote counting is actually still ongoing. And the official results, as Dara has mentioned, will be announced by the Election Commission by the end of March. These numbers actually provide an early indication of the potential distribution of seats in the parliament. So as we can see here, the PDIP, the red one here with the bull sign, is likely to secure the most seats and closely followed by Golkar and Gerindra but because the PDIP backed the losing presidential candidate, they may take up the opposition role. Even their Secretary General has also hinted that the party is ready to go into opposition. Previously, they are the largest party in the ruling coalition for the past 10 years during Jokowi's first and second term. And if we take this presidential election result, the two coalitions which back the first and third candidate might be the opposition. We still don't know whether they are going to form a coalition in the parliament led by PDIP as opposition leader, for example. We still have to wait and see. But if that's the case, we will see 5 opposition of total votes of 49% versus 4 winning coalition of around 43%. So ongoing discussions are also still taking place between party leaders and elites. For example, PPP here, who is now in the coalition with PDIP, might consider joining the winning coalition recently. So we still have to wait and see during the next few weeks. And speaking about the coalition itself, I would also explain a little bit how the coalition works in the parliament and the dynamics within our legislative process. If I still have time, Sacha?
Actually, that's what I was going to ask. Like, as you know, that I've seen the story of like enemies to friends in the presidential election, and there's more likely stories about enemies turning into friends as well when it comes to parliament. So, would you also like get your insight on that? Would that really affect anything that is being done in the parliament if we have stronger opposition, or if everyone ended up being one big friend group with very small opposition?
Right. So, well, the first point that I will say here is maybe as a background first, how our government system actually shapes our approach, right? So, for example, in the parliamentary system, like the Westminster system, like in the UK, coalitions are very crucial, especially when no party wins over 50% support, right? But our presidential system actually here works quite differently. For Indonesia, the president is actually, because he's directly elected by the people and holds quite a strong position as a result. It means there is actually no requirement actually to build a coalition to form a government, right? So the second point is that the legislative process in Indonesia itself is actually unique. So in the deliberation of bills, we have a principle that we call musyawarah mufakat, or deliberation and consensus. We also hear this a lot, consensus-based decision-making in ASEAN or Southeast Asia. So the practice here is consensus decision-making first, and then if they cannot reach the consensus-based decision, they will then resort to the majority-based through voting. But it's quite rare in the bill deliberation. They usually get the decision through the consensus. And the opposition here also shows up in different ways, like, for example, small groups of opposition share their views during the plenary, and sometimes parties like PKS and Democrats might walk out during the discussion to show their disagreement. But parties which often caught in fierce battles, for example, in the media, can actually eventually come together to form grand coalitions, as you say, Kacha, based on the consensus itself during the deliberation of the bill. And the precedent that we have here, at least during the last 2 terms of Jokowi, we had what they call constructive opposition. In this case, opposition parties might warn or agree with certain bills, but agree with conditions. For example, during this happened during the deliberation of budget bill for the pandemic emergency response back in 2020, and also during the deliberation of job creation bill, in which Democratic Party supported the bill with some reservations, but without changing the provision of the law itself. So, and PKS at the time was firmly refused the bill. So that's actually the dynamics. And the third point, following the election, some parties might call for reconciliation. So after being opposing coalition in the election, they usually work together, even informally, to consolidate the efforts within the parliament. So as a result, it will encourage all parties to work together despite their differences. And also, after election, the winning parties can also get certain benefits or advantages in the parliament, including taking the speakership and also the presiding officers, so like the vice speakers, because this is very vital in determining the priority list of national legislation programs, or prolegnas. Also in leading parliamentary organs like commissions, there are 11 commissions, and also committees. For example, the winning party may take the budget committee or legislative committee, the vital ones. But again, if PDIP is going to assume the role of the opposition, it might present a different dynamic than the last 10 years, given the PDIP reputation for being a strong, quite strong and assertive opposition, like during the SBY era. So yeah, to conclude, I think commonly people tend to view parliamentary politics through a binary lens of left versus right, as constantly opposing forces. But one might argue that the challenge in Indonesia doesn't lie in polarization itself, but in our political parties' lack of opposition and conflict within the legislative process. This, I would say, is quite distinct characteristic that set us apart. And we could raise questions later about the vibrancy and diversity of our political discourse. So yeah, there are my 2 cents. Sorry if I don't really cover everything that you asked, Kacha. In the interest of time, I will leave it to you.
Explanation about the uniqueness of Indonesian parliament and political system. Seems like Indonesia is just not very good at staying in conflict and opposing each other, which could be good in some ways, but could also challenge into how in creating an accountability system. So we have talked about the presidential elections and the political parties, like all the elites. How about we talk about how the citizens actually experience the election? So I would like to invite Nadia to talk about what is different about this election, especially with 50% of the voters being in the youth, and then with the rising role of the digital media. So please share what are the interesting stories about the new ways candidates engage with voters.
Okay, so first of all, thank you, BSU, for having us, and thank you, Kakacha, for the questions. So let me cover the fun part here of the politics. So yes, citizen experience, just like what happened in many other countries. I think, of course, some people care and some people don't really care about the elections. However, I might say that this is absolutely a fascinating journey for us Indonesians, these elections, especially during the past months here in Indonesia. I can feel that people were more enthusiastic, not just because more people realized the importance of the elections, but also the fact that we have an interesting political dynamic, as has been explained and mentioned by Dara and also Pita. We finally see new faces after 10 years, and unique coalitions, unique new coalitions as well. As Dara has mentioned, we see now both candidates from the previous 2 elections team up, and we see new candidates, 2 pairs of new candidates. So it feels fresh and give hopes to many. And it is even more interesting as these candidates are fighting for votes from the youth, as more than half of the voters are under 40 years old, as Kakacha mentioned. And all these things happen during the age of an advanced digital and technology era. So we're having more youth in a digital era responding to such interesting political situations. So what's the implications? On one hand, it brings new energy and nuance to the politics. Like candidates do more digital campaign more than ever, as you can see on the screen, where they use AI, they do live TikTok, they share like a lot of short clips of campaigns to showcase their candidate profile, speech, and even dance or visual songs. And it also happened for the legislative or the representative that's also campaigning at the moment. And if we see in the next slides, we also see volunteerism to support candidates and elections. Many organic social movements emerge. Like we can see like some of the K-popers create a fan base to support one of the candidates. I mean, it's very cute and very rare in a political sphere in Indonesia. And also, there are a lot of digital platforms established by citizens, by community, not by the government, to provide information about the candidates, about the parties, about the policy and the visions, and even create a platform to do a parallel real count based on citizens' report. And that happened emergingly in this election. So I think in general, the campaign is more interactive and attractive, Like, for example, with live TikTok, we can invite and talk with the audience. Also, in the offline campaigns, there is a trend where it's not only a boring one-way speech anymore. So we can see how people questions and challenge candidates' ideas and vision. Can we go to the next slide, please? And yeah, so it's also not only, discussion, it's not only live TikTok, but it's also a more fun offline campaign as well, like, dancing or other new creative ways of getting people engaged with the political situation right now. So these are new campaigns formed, and these are generally more engaging and attractive compared to what has been happened in 2019 or 2014. It attracts more people to participate and engage. In this case, we've made a very good progress, I think, in our democratic journey. And as Kakacha has mentioned as well, the votes turnout is considerably high compared to other countries, which was estimated at around 83 to 85% for legislative and executive votings. However, we were also saturated and exhausted, especially people here in Indonesia. And also, if you also, some of Indonesians abroad also experience the same, because youth generation mostly use social media as the main source of information, right? Like TikTok, X, Instagram, Facebook, and many other social media. But we also acknowledge that we have insufficient or limited level of digital literacy and deep inequalities in education, poverty, while we have one is demographic. So it reinforced the fact that the algorithm of the social media validate or reinforce what we want to believe, including false information, hoax, negative, or even black campaign, which is hard to control, and it also retains us in our own bubble with limited offer of the other sides of the story, which might be the fact. That's, I think, where things can be toxic and people are flooded by information and even starting to have trust issues towards the candidates or the government or even toward each other. I feel like people was already tired by the end of the campaigning period. But in the end, I think, there might be a tweet war, there might be heated arguments in television or social medias. However, what happened on the ground is, I might say, pretty positive. I must say that this year's election is generally safe. It's a peaceful one, especially in the grassroots. People are, excited to come to join the campaign, but still coexist with other supporters peacefully. We might even have arguments with friends, but we still be friends or at least acquaintance. Like, I think that's also the uniqueness of Indonesia, because we've learned a lot from this young age of democracy. We've experienced like repressions, killings from 1965, 1998 tragedy. We've also experienced great polarization, as Kadar mentioned, in some previous elections. We've experienced, a cycle where we found a hope in democracy, and then autocracy arrives, and then social unrest exists to bring back democracy. And I think this whole process, this whole cycle, established a new form of democracy that suits the context of our country, Indonesia, at the time the most. So I think Indonesian is currently at the stage where the people don't want to be fooled or provoked by the elite to hate each other. I feel like we have a stronger sense of unity now than ever. And I think that what helps people, move on and focus on the greater objectives, or not doing violence and so on. And I believe persistence is not equal to violence as well. People can fight when there is something wrong through other means other than violence. And democracy is not only about the election. So I think moving forward with this amazing energy and this year's elections, I think it is also important for us to preserve the energy, this exciting way to engage people, more youth to politics, so it can last long, the energy, and so the democratic process can be continuously exercised. I think that's sort of what happened on the ground, Kaja.
Thank you, Nadia. So I think we could see that how Indonesian democracy and politics could be quite vibrant and just engage a lot of like citizens and kind of come up with new ways to get people engaged. And a very creative way. But I think we can also have to admit that there are like concerns and controversies within this election as well, especially people saying that, oh, a lot more gimmicks than programmatics. And there are also, just before the election, a few days before, there's a documentary called Dirty Vote, which mentions about all the dirty practices that could happen in the Indonesian election. So there's both kind of like signs of like vibrant, engaged in democracy, but also still the old ways of like patronage and sort of all the flaws. And this is also especially with the trend of like global democratic regressions. So what do you think, this is my question to the three of you, like how do you think we can improve our democracy in general? And do you think that Indonesia democracy has actually improved, or has it been a part of this group that has regressed? What's your opinion? Maybe starting from Dara, then Dita, and then Nadia again.
Okay, thank you, Kacha. So these violations do exist, but it cannot deny the fact that the people with such large voice still want a part of development like Jokowi. It's 58% voters equal 100 millions of voters, and that's not a small number. And with this landslide victory, maybe we need to ask ourselves, is the narrative of democratic decline really a concern of the wider public, or conversely just a concern for the educated middle class? It might be the case that democracy and related issues are perhaps not important issue for the general public at the present in Indonesia. Perhaps the people in Indonesia have other priorities beyond the issue of democratic declines, because from the survey, we found that top of mind issue for voters in Indonesia always three things. The first one is price of goods, lacks of job, and corruption in the sense of fairness in getting assistance from government. Other concerns like freedom of speech goes in the bottom of the list. And interestingly, from the survey, we found that satisfaction with the performance of democracy remains consistently high, above 70%, even on the voting day from the quick count result. So maybe again, what wider people think of democracy is somewhat different from what we think about democracy, you know. So maybe I just want to say something simple. Maybe it's time for us to examine Indonesia just not from one angle. And it's a good idea for us to think that maybe Indonesian people right now have different priorities from Indonesia. But back to the democracy, as we can see, weeks before the election, civil society organization, as well as academics and activists, spoke out against Jokowi for what they saw as his political maneuvering. And we still have platforms for that. The protests and everything, it's still in the place. And I agree that we have like a big homework on that. But maybe this is like a question for us too as well. Is democracy the means or an end, right? And as we can see, like in Indonesia, we still have investigative media outlets. And also in the country, we still have a decentralized system that I think will help restrain the president power. So that's just my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you, Dara. Dita, what do you think?
Okay, so yeah, I agree that our election are lively, but also full of issues like you just mentioned, including the dirty tricks shown in the Dirty Vote documentary. And also like voting doesn't focus on actual policies and etc. And all these problems, I think, sometimes makes us wonder if, just like Dara said, if democracy in Indonesia is also facing a tough time, or is it I mean, how is it in the grassroots level, right? I think it's not a simple yes or no question. We need to look at what's happening now and also how things have been historically to really understand the state of democracy here. So I think when people, for example, vote for reasons other than policies, and also believe everything they read on social media, or see money influencing politics, just like Dirty Vote shows, I think it is clear actually we have some big problems at one side, but because these issues actually can make people lose faith in how elections and democracy work, and also it could decrease the trust towards democratic institutions, which I think for some institutions is already quite low, including towards the parliament. But on the other side, I think a lot of people are still actively participating in the elections. Just like Kacha said in the beginning, the turnout rate is very high. And also talking about political issues, people at the grassroots level, and also we see many different parties and candidates. This shows that I think democracy is still alive and kicking in Indonesia. So even though there are real concerns that could hurt, I think, how our democracy works, there's also a strong sense of involvement and discussion among the public. The key, I think, will be how we deal with these challenges, right? So how we could make elections to be more transparent, accountable, and fair. For example, the system that is now being used by the KPU, the Election Commission, the one that is that should show the transparency of the voting results, but it's currently have a lot of technical glitch. We should deal with these challenges, and also there's a good chance for democracy to not only survive but hopefully thrive in this country. And I think also a healthy democracy thrives also on public participation. So from the institutional point of view, for example, in the parliament, we see many reforms and initiatives, including the open parliament itself and open government in the executive level. So yeah, I'm being optimistic at this level. So, but again, with caution, we still have to deal with these challenges.
Nadia, do you want to add anything to that?
Okay, so I think most of the part has been covered, but maybe I might add a little bit on that. Like, it's true that with the current modalities that we have, the institution that has been established in Indonesia to uphold the democracy, I think we still have the privilege where the citizens is the power holder, not the elites, and we still have chance to, you know, save the democracy or even redefine or you know, shift the democracy into what we actually need and what the country needs and what we actually care about the democracy itself. So I think this is certainly a moment where our unity as Indonesia is challenged, and we need to engage even more people to you know, have this kind of energy that we had during the election and bring them forward, bring them further beyond the election, so we can actually do what Kadara and Kadita also has been mentioned about, you know, fighting for our rights, our biggest objectives, the bigger goal of the nation of Indonesia. I think that's a little bit to add.
Okay, I'm sure there will be some great questions from the audience, so we're gonna start the Q&A. I'm gonna take 3 questions in one go. Just say your name, your affiliations, and a short questions. Yeah, start from you.
Hi, my name's Nick. I'm from Australia, so it's really wonderful to have a presentation on our nearest neighbour.
Oh.
So thank you for today. I wanted to ask a question about the presidential election and the tradition in Indonesia of electing presidents with military history. So you think of Suharto, Yudhoyono, and there have been others as well.
Yeah.
And obviously Prabowo sort of represents a return to that tradition. Although this election, rather than in 2014, he's presenting himself as more like a bancular uncle figure. But does it have implications for, I guess, like security in Indonesia? And I'm particularly thinking of like the status of West Papua, Irian Jaya as well. Like, are we going to see like a reversion to more militaristic sort of tendencies in the presidency?
Okay, thank you, Nick. A bit.
Thank you, Kak Amira, and all of the speakers. And I would like to appreciate that all the speakers are female, and it's very rare because in Indonesia, so can we give a round of applause? Yes. Yeah.
Panel.
Yeah, because in Indonesian politics we always have, like, you know, all male speakers and etc. And then now we have that kind of positivity. So I'm very happy with that. I have 2 questions. So first, since we understand that Prabowo and Gibran built their candidacy upon the platform of continuity, but in terms of public policy, I would like to ask. Do you think that it's going to remain the same? Because we see that there are a lot of differences in terms of personality between Joko Widodo and Prabowo Subianto. Jokowi is more pragmatic in his speeches and his policy making, but Prabowo at the same time, he is very ideological. He has always he always has that kind of strong narratives in his speeches in terms of heavy state influence on market and etc. etc. And then the second one would be that there are a lot of international observers and commentators saying that this is that there are a lot of similarities between what happened in the Philippines and in Indonesia. But do you think that kind of analogy is helpful to understand what happened in Indonesia?
Okay. Yep. Okay. Yeah, you do.
I also have two questions actually. The first question relates more to Parliament. So I think the first question was that it was mentioned that the differences in the political parties contrasts nationalism and more religious-based ideas. But then you also mentioned that this doesn't really reflect differences in fiscal policy, which is understandable compared to the UK, where it's mostly Labour or Conservative. So how do these values actually manifest in laws, if at all? And are party values basically manifested in the laws that are being made? And I think my second question was that it was also mentioned that Jokowi changed the constitution actually to lower the minimum age requirement for VP candidates. There were also allegations that nepotism was involved in this process. So is an optimistic view of democracy still possible when the judiciary cannot even afford, the proper safeguards and protection to prevent kind of an abuse of the executive or the prerogative power? That would be the equivalent in the UK. So yeah, I hope those two questions make sense.
Okay, so the first one is about implication to security policies. Sorry, would you want to go for this? What do you think the implications of Prabowo with his security policies? Oh, is it sound? Hello? Rita, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Or Nadia?
Yeah, sorry, who's gonna take?
Dara, would you like to take the first questions on the implications of Prabowo? I think Dara can answer two parts. The one is about Prabowo's policies, but also because you're a digital expert, you'll be able to comment on whether Indonesians and the Philippines elections are comparable, especially with the same techniques in TikTok and the dancing and everything. So maybe I'll just divide that into one answer for you, like a set of questions for you to answer.
Yeah, I think this is like, I don't know if we call misconception or something like that, but in the digital arena, what we see is it's not something that's orchestrated that much. People often say that, we have this a lot of buzzer and so on for this campaign, but mostly I would say that in the recent election 2024, the party and presidential candidate that thrives were the ones that understand marketing 101. It's as simple as that. There's no like conspiration or some like very organized thing. Of course we're organized, but it's basically just marketing 101. It's about outreach to the grassroots and also gathering the key opinion leader and so on. But I think it's not the same with what happened in Philippines in that sense, because what happened in Indonesia is more I think organically, if I may say, because the use of the catchy sound, and as Nadia also say that the candidates try to tap into the TikTok with live and so on. It's just like an engagement. And the second one with Philippines, the issue is quite different because of the drugs and also guns, right? But here in Indonesia, the issue is all about economy. Like people really care about the food on the table. So I think those are the differences on that. And on the security issue, we know that Prabowo is big on security because he is like the defense minister, and one of his agenda is to increase the budget of our security. And I think that's going to be like one priority for that, because Prabowo is very well versed on the geopolitics and how can Indonesia thrive in the APEC as well. But that's just my 2 cents.
So I think Josephine's questions should be can be answered by Dita. Like how does actually this ideological differences between Pancasila state ideology and Islam can actually manifest into laws? And if you also would like to answer the second question about like, can we still be optimistic when there is some sort of like nepotism and abuse in the judicial system to allow Gibran the vice president to run?
Okay, for actually, I want to add a little bit about the Papua issue. I think someone asked about that as well. The security. So I think as of now, I think we still quite don't know which kind of Prabowo that will emerge after this, because during the rallies, during the campaigns, he actually benefiting from Jokowi's widespread popularity. So he's essentially supporting a lot of Jokowi's policy, but he actually fundamentally stands for quite different things, I think, personally from Jokowi, because he advocates for like stronger state and positioning himself as a strong leader. And yeah, I think this scenario will have a quite even more nuance to the picture of Papua here. Prabowo, I think, will give, I think, different approach in terms of regional autonomy and also developmental policies in Papua that we could witness later. I think the commitment, the same commitment that will remain, I think, regarding the IKN, the capital, the new capital. I think it at some degree, I think will stay during the Prabowo administration. And regarding the difference in party ideologies, how it manifests in law, I think I will give one example during the deliberation of the sexual violence crime bill, or RUU TPKS, sexual violence crime bill. So during the deliberation of this bill, actually, it was deliberated for almost 6 years, and there's one provision that's the Islamist or Islamist Conservative Party are quite against, and at the end, because of the intervention from some political party leaders as well, and also the political party factions, they reached the agreement and they reached the consensus. So it's more like the again the things that I previously mentioned. So like how in terms of how Islam or religion could influence the laws, if I can say that. So yeah, I think that's one example for the difference of ideology. Again, as I said before, because they're not quite differ in terms of fiscal policies and other areas. And yeah, I think regarding the Constitutional Court, it's actually quite worrying how they mobilize state apparatus actually to basically gain a lot of things during the campaign, during the election itself. So I think this is, as I said before, we should proceed with caution. So this is the challenge that we have to deal with regarding the transparency. And we also now currently deliberating the revision of the bill regarding the election as well. So we need more coverage in that. We need more public participation in the deliberation of that bill. So yeah.
I think we can have another round of questions. So I'll take 3 more. Okay.
Thank you. So I think I share the same sentiment with the question before, in which like it feels to me that Jokowi is super powerful and kind of bend the rule to make his son running for vice president. Then my question is maybe like is it has something to do with the lack of oppositions in the Jokowi government? That's number one. And then if so, then how can like Indonesia democracy I don't know what kind of mechanism do we need so that we can have legit oppositions in our governments, or maybe it's just like, or is it just a phase of how democracy developed in our country? Like I just want to hear your opinion maybe on why political parties do not want to be oppositions in our democracy.
Thanks. My name is Adam. I'm from the Department of International Development here. One of the things I wanted to ask about is the role of Jokowi in the future administration. I can understand that Jokowi is still a very popular president, and he probably doesn't want to suffer the same fate as Yudhoyono, who was relegated fairly quickly. And intuitively, one could look at the ticket and think that Jokowi is intent on acting vicariously through his son Gibran, but Jokowi is without Megawati's PDIP. If he is trying to act through Gibran vicariously, then the office of vice president is one that is relatively easily marginalized. But again, he's still a very popular president who commands a lot of influence. What do you think the role of Jokowi is going to be in future administrations? And will someone like Prabowo look at someone so popular as Jokowi and think that he's really got to get him out of the way?
Thank you for the amazing presentation. Right, my name is Lodan. I'm from the MBA program here at Oxford. So I have like 2 questions. I think my first question is to Kadita, right? Because initially I think you mentioned that there are 2 kind of like ideology that kind of like coexist in our political party, which is either national and like Islamist. But I think there is like a third kind of like we call like another like power, political power that is still exists, which is be part of the legacy of the new order, which is the state apparatus, right? So my question more towards like, how does like the role of like state apparatus at the moment kind of like contributed to the end goal of the end result of the election, right? It's changing, is it waning, or is it like getting stronger in comparison to like what we had like, for example, 30 years ago? That's my first question. My second question, I think, is more toward to Nadia, right? It's safe to say that this year's election is a TikTok election, right? The last year we have TikTok data, right? There is around 44% of penetration rate, around 110 million monthly active user that is active in Indonesia and accessing TikTok on monthly basis. So my question is more toward how does it shape the face of the current election and then the future election, right? Because I believe that every election has their own team. 5 years ago, we have like political identity become like the main theme of our election, right? But then with the new media now, especially with TikTok, with safe to say that the moderation is pretty bad, how it will shape like the face of our kind of like discourse on democracy and discourse of election in the future? Kind of like your key takeaway. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lodang. So I think because Nadia didn't have any turn answering the question, I'll just gonna go straight to you with Lodang question. So yeah, what do you think how TikTok and its influence in Indonesian both current and future elections?
Yeah, so sorry, by the way, I just rejoined because I was kicked out during because of the unstable connections. But I got the final questions, the TikTok one. I think yeah, it's actually the 2 sides of the coins. I think it is true that it requires now in 2024 and also in the next elections, it requires a deep understanding on branding and communications. during the campaign. It's more than ever. I mean, like it's not only about the grassroots anymore. It's two realms now, the offline and the online and or digital realm right now. And I think it shows in these elections, in this particular elections, as Kadara also mentioned, that the one that has a very good strategy in the communication, the branding, might have like higher chance to win. Which in this case, I actually witnessed like how Prabowo Gibran handled their communication, handled their branding, and how it is so catchy that even kids even really caught into their branding and the communication, the campaigns. Even when people at this age, like in the high schools, in the senior high school, or even secondary schools, have no right to vote yet, but they're actually really engaged because of those strategy, those communication strategy. And I think that's what will make a difference now, because it's not only about maybe in the past we see people that is closer to the citizens who actually do the rally while engaging with more grassroots, more religious leaders, or more people in the villages will win, but not anymore. I think it's going to shift, it's going to change, because it will tap wider audience with a more creative ways as well. Not only being a politician that is seen by the people in the televisions, but in a more random way. Even I mean, you can even create a content when you don't even joining the rally, you don't even joining the offline campaign as well. So I think that's going to shift this strategy, the political strategy, which I think it shows how the current leading candidates might actually win because of that good strategy.
Thanks, Nadia. Dara, I think you can also add something to the questions on TikTok, but you can also probably add an answer about speculating about what would Jokowi role be after this, once his pass his decision to Prabowo. Like, will he still be around? Like, how could he continue to have influence?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think Nadia covered the TikTok part, but what also surprising for us in Indonesia was Meta platform, Facebook and Instagram is still very vibrant, especially in the rural area. Like in a Facebook, usually people in Indonesia use the free version of that. So what they see, maybe all the the short video, they cannot see that. So they see the text-based one. So what the reality, political reality, might be different than what happened in TikTok. That's one thing. But I agree that engagement, digital platform just opened a new way of, especially the youth can participate in politics. But moving on to what role Jokowi will play, I think he will play the role of advisor, of course, because even just this week he discussed the free lunch program in Prabowo's cabinet. So that's the sign that he still wants to be, involved in everything that the new cabinet doing. So I think we will see like a lot of Jokowi's footprints and fingerprints in the next presidency. And I also want to respond to the question about, why in Indonesia, political party don't want to be opposition. The first one, as we all know that the democracy in Indonesia, the voting directly, it's just very young, right? We only have like 4 times directly vote for our leaders. Before, it's not like that. And the reformation is just 25 years. So the political process pretty much is still the pork barrel politics, in which if you're part of the government, then you got all the projects, you got all the good things. And if you're out of the opposition, out there, you kind of hungry, that's kind of thing. So that's still the stage of democracy in Indonesia. And the second one, it's the weakness of the political parties itself, because in Indonesia, due to the young stage of democracy like that, it's so common for political parties in Indonesia only do the outreach and campaign 5 years, once in a 5 years. And when this election done, then they forget about all the campaign, all the messaging and all. And there's no constituent relation built, as massive as when the campaign period was. So I think the weak ties between the voters and also to the political party, to the candidate itself, because in Indonesia, people usually just pick the candidates due to the social shared identity, but not for the programmatic side. So I think that's what contribute to the, the unwillingness to become the opposition, because they not incentivized enough. So how to address that? I think two things, from the demand side and the supply side. For the demand side, it means that we need to push for political literacy for the people, so they can, ask for better candidates, better political parties that shows up for them. But also in the supply side, this is the part that I think many people forget, is the upskilling capacity of the political parties itself, because what I did in this election is basically with the political party, I went to the rural and taught the candidates to do the digital data-driven campaign, and also how to use, the data from the previous election to map their constituency, and so they can make like efficient campaign, not wasting a lot of money on the campaign. That's one thing that we need to keep pushing forward, not just from one political party, but I think the ecosystem must create the supply and demand in that. So the politics and democracy in Indonesia will, improve in the future.
Thank you, Dara. So, Dara, you also kind of like partly answer about the one about why there is a lack of oppositions in Indonesian politics, and also a bit of a role of state apparatus when you mentioned about the how pork barrel politics and clientelistic politics are still kind of a main way of how politicians relate to the voters. But I think, Dita, you can also add to this. Like, do you think the weakness of Indonesian politics lack in the lacking oppositions and
Yeah. I was also about to add about answer regarding the this question regarding the pork barrel as well, but Dara already explained it perfectly. I just want to add two things. I think the first one is because of the electoral dynamics and the system itself. So I think the electoral system and the rules that we have currently might, I think, favor the more established parties. So as a result, it makes it quite challenging for new or smaller parties to gain significant traction or visibility, even especially in other part of Indonesia. I mean, other than Java, for example. So as a result, I think the political landscape will be, there will be fewer voices are able to effectively challenge the status quo. So that's why I think the opposition is also, we see less and less. And then I think the consolidation of political power as well. So as I said before, we always see the reconciliation after the election and the consolidation of political power among a few dominant parties itself. So I think these really limit the space for opposition, because major parties may align on certain policies or political strategies, and they should, usually reduce the diversity of viewpoints, and also reduce the diversity of the strength of the opposition, and also the candidates itself mainly emerging from the ruling elite. So leading to I think this will lead to a convergence of visions and a lack of genuine alternative, I think.
Okay, thank you, Dita. So I think we already reached the end of the event. Once again, I want to say thank you so much to our speakers, and it's 1 a.m. now. straight to bed for all of you. And I would like to say thank you again for being such a great audience. Let's give a round of applause for our speakers. As a reminder, this is only one of the events for the Blavatnik election briefing series. So there will be more events to come, as there will be more big elections in other countries coming soon, like India and then even the US and everything else. So please stay tuned and join us for next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Kacha. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.